Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is the Public Works Podcast. My name is Joseph Blackman, and today got a real treat for you. Her name is Jenifer Willer. She is the city engineer of beautiful Eugene in wonderful Oregon. Jenifer, say what's up to everybody.
Hi, Joseph. Thank you for having me.
Anytime, anytime. So you are the city engineer of Eugene, Oregon. I always have to ask this question from the start. Like, I get it. We know what a city is. We know what an engineer is. Well, some of us know what an engineer is. So what does a city engineer do? So take us through a random Tuesday, what Jenifer does from the time you get to work before you leave. And then we'll dig into the backstory of Jenifer Willer. So go ahead and tell us what you do all day.
Probably a city engineer is probably even further away from what you think an engineer typically does. It's not quite as technical in the engineering as my work once was, but when I started out as a civil engineer doing public works kind of stuff, there was a lot of going out and doing field work where I'm testing materials, testing conditions, inspecting the work that was being constructed to make sure it meets our standards and it's something that we can maintain. As I progressed in my career, I became a project manager, which means that I was overseeing the technical staff that was doing a lot of that testing and inspection and design work, as well as doing some of my own as well. I then became a principal civil engineer, which means I was overseeing a team of project managers and technical staff. And with each kind of step, I became a little bit more removed from the technical engineering work. So now as the city engineer, I oversee a division of about 80 people. And so my work is not just like engineering focused. There's also kind of that division management of budgets and policies and procedures. But I'm also responsible still for overseeing the engineering standards for our infrastructure and the public right-of-way, and approving any kind of deviations that maybe we want to accept or change from that, and then doing a lot of work with contractors and consultants.
Gotcha. So it sounds like what you do as an engineer now isn't really what started out probably as your engineering career. You're probably working with graph paper and calculators and all these formulas, and now you're just doing emails and managing 80 people. So is that correct?
It's pretty correct.
Gotcha.
I mean, I really like the engineering work, and I really loved when I was a project manager too. So I do find ways to still stay in touch and involved in that kind of work, because that's where my passion really is. But yeah, it's not quite as technical as it once was.
Gotcha. All right, so let's hit the rewind button. I know Jenifer probably wasn't always leaning over a CAD table trying to figure out the whole engineering thing. What was young Jenifer into? Were you in a, I mean, what got you going down the path?
You would be surprised. Young Jenifer was kind of a public infrastructure geek.
Okay, interesting.
There are pictures of me as a toddler with my dad's hard hat on. He was an engineer, and I'd be wearing his hard hat and playing with Tonka trucks in the yard, building roads for my dolls and my Barbies to, be able to get to where they need to go. And
love it.
So yeah, definitely an engineer geek from a long way back.
Gotcha. I mean that's usually a first. I mean I haven't heard that too often where you start off as an engineer, you end up as an engineer. But so okay, so you graduate high school. Are you still in the engineering? Did you know when you went to graduating high school, college, vocational school that you wanted to stay in engineering?
So yeah, I mean this is where things kind of get a little bit interesting. So I kind of will go back a little bit to young Jenifer. So I mentioned that my dad was a civil engineer. He worked for public agencies. My grandfather was an engineer working for the Oregon Department of Transportation. And I'm aware that my great-grandfather was also a civil engineer. I never knew him, but I knew that I had that legacy of engineering. And even when I was in high school, I thought that I wanted to be an engineer. I kind of had my future mapped out. I was, kind of a type A engineering personality. And so I was like,
Standard.
sure, I was going to Oregon State and I was going to study civil engineering. And it wasn't until I went to school for engineering, so I went to college, that it started to occur to me that this was a career that women didn't choose. It never occurred to me because I had so much support growing up of,
Sure.
of course you can be an engineer and
Sure.
this is what we
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
But when I went to college, I realized I was in a vast minority of women in class. And I thought this was in the late 80s. I thought, we were kind of making a lot of progress around gender equity, but there were a lot of comments made by professors and
I bet.
students and about, hoping that I was, not me personally, but to the group in general, that the women in the class were there to be engineers and not find husbands. And, comments like that, after a while, it was like, if this is what the profession's like, maybe I don't want to do this. So in my act of rebellion, I'll call this a rebellion, I decided that I was going to go to law school, which,
Okay.
and so I ended up graduating in political science and focusing on public administration and law, and ended up going to law school. And then it was after law school that I said to myself, that was kind of stupid of me to not finish up that engineering degree. And I don't really know what I might do with it, whether I want to be an engineer or whether I want to be a lawyer that, does something related to engineering or construction. But I knew that I just really didn't feel the passion for the law that I had felt growing up. As far as, I had this
Sure.
dream about doing it, civil engineering and working on public infrastructure. So I went back for that final year and have been an engineer ever since. So I've now
Wow.
been in the profession for 23 years.
Wow. 23 good years. So answer this. This is my first time hearing of a ex-law student being an engineer. So in every field or every two fields, there's some type of transferable skills, right?
Yeah.
There's something that you got really, really, really good at in law school. And once you started doing the engineering thing, you said, you know what? Like, you're kind of stand out in the engineering side because you got good at something in law school. What are those 1, 2, 3 things that that transferred from, the whole law school side to being an engineer?
Yeah, I'm with you in believing that, having these transferable skills and just learning as much as you can. I've always loved learning. I mean, thus I have 3 degrees. And I'm also the kind of person that just says yes to every opportunity that comes my way, just because I know it's going to teach me something. And maybe it's not something I want to continue doing, but I've had an experience from that I can now bring to something else. And I'll say that at this point, working for the City of Eugene, I've said yes to so many things, some of them really super difficult, but I got through them. And it's now made me the kind of person that people come to and ask questions, because it's like, oh, Jenifer did something like that, or she seems to know about all this stuff. And it's like, I know about it because I tried it. But talking about transferable skills, I will say that until I went to law school, public speaking was something that I could not
Yeah.
do. I actually passed out in high school when I had to give a speech in front of the classroom. The teacher kept me from hitting the floor hard. But
Wow.
I was so anxious about public speaking. And when I went to law school, and then I had a job with the Multnomah County District Attorney's Office during my final year of law school, and after and between law school and the bar exam, that I had to talk every single day. And at my job, I had to go to hearings or negotiations every single day. And so when you're doing it for your job, you kind of get over that whole I
Totally.
can't
Yeah.
speak in public anymore, because
Yeah.
either you hate it and you go do something else, or you overcome that fear or anxiety. And for me, I've always been a little bit stubborn in that I don't like people telling me I can't do something, including myself. So to
Mm,
me, that whole me telling myself that I couldn't speak in public and that I was too nervous and I was just going to mess everything up, I don't like even me telling myself I couldn't do it. And
love it. Love it.
so, yeah,
Wow.
I mean, I would say that's one of the bigger skills. The other thing is that I I can really comfortably read a lot of really dry,
I was about to
technical,
say the
contractual specification kind of stuff.
yeah,
And
the
uh,
speed reading is probably top notch in your
I mean, I am kind of, I mean, a lot of people give me kind of weird looks when I'm like, let's get out the specs and look at that. And I'm like
Ooh.
excited to go do.
Gotcha. Okay, so reading and then public speaking, that kind of helped you out there. Um, and let's say you're mentoring a young Jenifer. Young Jenifer asked more seasoned Jenifer, hey, what skill set, besides going to law school, what skill set should I pick up to be successful at what you're doing today? What skill set would you tell young Jenifer to pick up?
Yeah. So, I mean, the obvious ones are, the math and science. Those are super important to engineers. Law school is definitely not, something that you need to do to become city engineer or whatever you want to do in the engineering field. I would go back to just saying, again, yes to experiences and getting a really broad experience. Um, Even if that means like working on a construction crew for a summer. Because the other thing, and this is the advice I give to a lot of young women, is learn how things are built and how things work. Because a lot of time girls aren't really encouraged and that kind of tactical, trying to take things apart, putting them together, learn how they work and are built, and anything you can do to kind of foster those kind of skills and understanding really pays off in the engineering field.
Good stuff. Good stuff. That makes sense. So it's story time. I need a story from Jenifer of when something went wrong under your watch, what you did to rectify it, and then what lessons you learned from it to apply to your future career.
Yeah, I don't necessarily have a specific circumstance, but I do have something that I think routinely happens to us, especially I think nowadays when everybody feels kind of under pressure and overworked, is that sometimes you make decisions that um, are based on assumptions of what you think that everybody wants you to do in a particular situation.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
you think, I'm just going to save some time because this meets the standards or whatever it is. And you go forward with it and you get further down the road and somebody says, oh my gosh, this is the worst thing I've ever seen. And you're like ruining our neighborhood by building it this way. And um, I think the biggest, I mean, any like mistakes that I can kind of think about throughout my career has usually been places where I've made assumptions that I think what people want or fit, instead of just kind of taking that time to go and talk to the neighbors or the person living on the street and just say, hey, what's your experience here? Because as soon as I start having those conversations, something comes up, or I already start kind of telling them about what we want to do so that they have a better
Huh.
understanding, that when they see something, they don't go, oh my gosh, this is the worst thing you could ever do to our street. And how dare you come here and not know anything
Yeah.
about us? And so, I mean, that would be every time I can think about like frustrations or mistakes on projects, it's usually been because we didn't step back and talk to the most involved people.
Interesting. How do you think other cities are I guess, rectifying that or going about that the right, or is that kind of something across the board where, the people who should be involved, not involved in the decision, but made aware of the decision that they're not involved? How can that be fixed?
Yeah, it's not even just decisions, it's just participating in the process of, you know, investigating, collecting the data, figuring things out. And, and I don't think that anybody has it figured out, because I think that every project, every street, every neighborhood is unique. And
Totally.
what worked in one area is going to be something completely different in another. And I think sometimes there's a little bit of a danger. I feel like nowadays people tend to be a lot more engaged and wanting to know what's going on. But,
Oh yeah.
at the same time, some of that kind of depends on the neighborhood that you're in. And I can think of some specific projects that we've done as a city back in the past, where things that we did in one neighborhood became kind of, you know, outrageous, and people really got up in arms, and they really kind of took control of the project and wanted to be engaged and help make the decisions. And then we did something similar in another neighborhood where, quite honestly, they just didn't have like the resources or kind of the connections with the powers at the city and
Yeah.
political know-how, and they kind of just accepted it. And I'm not necessarily saying it was a bad project, but it was just very eye-opening to see that difference, just based on, you're in a more affluent kind of area that kind of expects that people are going to do what they want,
Yeah.
versus a neighborhood where people kind of say, people do stuff to us all the time. And so this is
Uh,
another place where, nobody's going to
Makes
care
sense.
if I think that that doesn't make any sense.
That makes sense. Yeah, and I get that different demographics kind of have different approaches to things for sure,
And so I think that
socioeconomically.
that's one thing. While I know that there's been a lot going on in our society of people trying to figure out how do we, make sure that we're not only just engaging people, but asking people what they think, and getting all the opinions. I feel like that this is still a place where, the work isn't done here. Because like I said, every neighborhood is unique. You could be probably on the East Coast and it's completely different from the West Coast or the
Sure.
Midwest. And because there's culture, and again, every neighborhood, every street is different. And so just there is no cookie cutter approach to
Yeah.
how you do this. And it's a lot of work. And I get that when like I said, when you feel overwhelmed and that you have too much work to do, and your boss is asking you about deadlines, and it's like you're missing every single one of them. It's it I'm not necessarily saying it's intentional, but it's pretty easy to just go, can I make some assumptions here and just move on? And
Yeah.
and that's I think the hard place where everybody is at right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Real quick, I wanted to touch on something. You said you were over, or not over, but you have 80 teammates on your team. How My passion is workforce development. So what are you saying? What are you seeing out in the field that's working in regards to attracting new talent, retaining good talent, and then making sure that the talent that's leaving the industry, like the people who are retiring, that they don't walk out with all that knowledge and don't impart any of that on the youngsters. I mean, oh, being over 80 people, I mean, I don't know how your eyebrows are so perfect. I don't know how your office doesn't look like it's crazy, but everything's well put together. So I want to know from you, like, what are you doing? What are you seeing out there? What are you doing
Oh
that's
my
working?
gosh. Well, thank you for the compliments. I'm glad that I look put together anyway. Hey, perception goes a long way,
It
right, to
does, yeah.
reality. um, but it's definitely a challenge. We recently had a presentation to our city council about workforce at the City of Eugene that indicated that 20%, I think it was 20% of our workforce will be eligible for retirement in the next 3 years. And
20%.
that is on top of a lot of people having left our organization for a variety of reasons over the last few years, just like everybody else. And so it is a constant struggle. And a lot of people are in learning mode. And so it really is important for people who have more experience to find ways to coach and mentor people that are in the organization. And again, that's really hard when we talk about everybody feeling completely overwhelmed and that they have too much on their plate to do. And it's really easy to kind of push that stuff to the back burner and kind of hope that people will learn on the job. But I also am afraid that sometimes not providing that support will lead people to leave because they're like, I don't know what I'm doing and I don't have any contact or network at the city. And, City of Eugene is still working in a hybrid environment. That's one thing that we kind of found, I think, for just a workforce competitiveness is that positions that can work remotely have been approved to work remotely. And so that makes us pretty unusual, I think, for a lot of public agencies, although I see it like here in Oregon, fairly common that that's still taking place. But it also makes it really hard for all those new people that come in, that they're not necessarily having the benefit of making the connections and the network and being able to overhear conversations to learn from or, say what's going on. And so just really being thoughtful on how we continue to coach and mentor people. And that's something that I'm super passionate about project management. And so I have, created different things around staff to help train them on project management skills. I'm the education committee chair for our chapter APWA. And so, I mean, education and mentoring and coaching is really important for me. And it's just, it means a lot for all those because we have so many new people. Our organization looks completely different than it did 5 years ago.
Wow. And you're saying 20% is leaving or eligible for retire in the next 5 years, you said?
I think she said 3 years.
Next 2 years, And that rings true, I guess, industry wide. I mean, a lot of guys are saying, man, I got so-and-so is about to retire. He's taking 30 years of knowledge with him. What am I going to do?
And that's where me doing different things where I'm talking to you and, getting, these awards that have me in the newspaper or on the radio is that for me, it's just talking about being an engineer because I want to encourage people to, think about engineering and working for public works and engineering on public infrastructure because it's a really good career. And I know that a lot of people don't know about it. I was super fortunate with my background and my family that I grew up with it. But, the more I hear from people, a lot of the people that are in engineering are because they had, a parent or a grandparent that was in engineering. They didn't know about it. So the more I can talk to teachers and parents and grandparents and other supportive adults about engineering, hopefully they go, hey, I know a young person that likes math and science and problem solving and wants to know how things work or just honestly cares about their community. Because, we're talking about all the services that make your community healthy and safe and a good place to live. It's a great way to be involved.
That's a good point. The more we, I guess, put out these different positions, because a lot of kids are running to tech because it's sexy. Like build an app, design a website. That's what's cool nowadays. But I would say back in, your fourth generation, probably around those days, engineering was cool because we're coming out of the war and we're going to, build America. And, everybody wanted to be an engineer because that's what was hot back then. So I think if we got back to promoting these certain careers, these certain jobs, it'll start to triculate up from college and high school, and then we'll start to see an influx of youngsters coming into the
Well,
industry.
I mean, tech is really sexy, but so is climate change right now. I mean,
It's
everybody's
true.
concerned about clean water and clean
Yeah.
air
Yeah.
and you know, public works and civil engineers do. I mean, that's our work is
Yeah.
about transportation and water and wastewater. And I mean, so if you're interested in that kind of stuff, you can totally geek out on it here at Public Works.
Totally. Totally. Love it. Love it. Speaking of geeking out, how does Jenifer keep her sword sharp? What are you doing to stay up with the times? What's your personal or professional development regimen like to where you
Yeah.
stay up on what's innovative?
Yeah, so I am very active in APWA. So I do a lot of work and going to continuing education around that. It's also made it so that I have a really good network of other public works professionals here in Oregon that I can routinely hear from and learn from around there. The other thing is that I do just like learning, and so for me, part of just keeping sharp is learning new skills. And so like I am routinely, being around with learning a language, or I've decided I'm gonna like relearn calculus. And so I've been taking calculus courses.
Okay.
But I mean, and so it's not necessarily engineering focused, but it's more of just like keeping my brain working and learning new things and again being open to everything that's happening around me. But
Gotcha.
yeah, a
Gotcha.
lot of continuing education and literature review.
Yeah. Law school. So let's say we ask somebody who knows you, but they don't work with you. If I ask them, what does Jenifer do all day, every day? And what does she do for our community? What would they get totally wrong by answering that question?
Well, I would say the people that know me really well but don't work with me probably think that I'm a lot more quiet and introverted than I am at work.
Really?
So the people in my regular life know me as a pretty extreme introvert who kind of likes to be in my own little
Really?
cave and
Wouldn't have thought
quiet
that.
and yet for work I turn on the energy and I talk and I do interviews like this because that's my work persona. But it, you know,
Yeah.
if you know any introverts, you would know that that all comes at a cost, and that means the people in my personal life have to give me a lot of downtime and a lot of quiet time.
Yeah.
And so they probably don't realize how much I'm, on at work.
Sure. Okay. Let's say you're commissioned to put up a billboard, and this billboard is in the most trafficked area of Eugene. What ask of your community in regards to, I guess, being a city engineer would you put on this billboard?
I would just say to be involved. I mean, we've got so much going on, and there's always something that we could use engagement from the public on about what's happening on your street or on your neighborhood, or even what's going on with your sewer, or and to just continue or let people know. We are actually really interested in that, and some people probably
Yeah.
think that what they have seen isn't important or that we already know about an issue.
Uh-huh.
But unless people come forward and tell us things,
Yeah.
we don't necessarily know. And so
That's a
I
good
would
point.
just, continue to tell people that we want to know and we want to hear, and to continue to just be involved and engaged with the different public works activities that we're doing.
Gotcha. What would you say is the most notorious or the most frequent text message you get from family and friends around town? Like, what kind of questions are they asking? Are they asking you like, why is such and such stoplight so slow? Or, what kind of construction are you doing on the south side of town? Like, what are people hitting you up about?
Yeah, I would say that most people always ask questions like, why is that stop sign there? Or why did you change that traffic signal to not allow a right turn on red? Or
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
The sky is falling, right? Yeah.
well, we're all creatures of habit, right? And so it's like, I've never had an issue there. So clearly
Right.
there can't be an issue. And it's like, well,
Yeah, yeah. Gotcha. All right, let's say I'm coming to Eugene and I text you ahead of time. I say, hey, Jenifer, where can I go to get the best burger in Eugene? Where are you going to send me?
the best burger. So I guess I would have, I'll give you a few options, and it kind of depends on what kind of vibe you want.
Okay.
McMenamins is kind of a regional burger place here in the Northwest. And it has kind of this 60s rock kind of, think of Grateful Dead, Jimi Hendrix kind of vibe to it. And they have hostels, and so there's several of them throughout the region, and there's several here in Eugene. And I think their food is really good. Another place that's right here in downtown Eugene is called Killer Burgers, and so it's a little bit more kind of current, kind of a little bit
Okay.
loud and everything. And then the place that I would say is pretty popular around here, as far as always makes the Reader's Choice Award in newspapers and stuff like that, would be Cornucopia. There's several of them here in our area, and they're a very popular place to go.
Okay. And did
They're
I hear
all
earlier?
very good burger places.
It sounds like it. It sounds like it. I'm sure Eugene would get it right out of all places. But did it sound? Did you go to Oregon State and now you work in Eugene?
That is correct.
Okay. I
Yeah,
thought I heard that.
I grew up in duck territory.
Okay, so you grew up in duck territory. You went to Oregon State,
Yes.
and now you're back.
Yes.
I gotcha. I think they had a game a couple of days ago.
Yes, they did, and I think the Beavers won.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. All right. On every show, I like to leave a space for you to thank mentors that you had along your journey, and then also offer a word of inspiration and motivation to your industry counterparts.
Yeah. So yeah, I have had some really great mentors along in my career. I would say that one of the prior city engineers here, Mark Schoening, just I always really appreciated how kind of calm and collected he would seem, and always, just very polite to people, even kind of in extreme circumstances where people were like really upset about a project. I just always really appreciated that kind of persona of his. And then I had a mentor back in my first engineering job when I went to a consulting firm in Idaho, Mike Holliday. And that one, it was great because he was one of these kind of old school engineers who kind of really liked to do things by just judgment and feel. And so it was always really interesting that, we'd go someplace and he'd say, well, that looks like, 5 gallons per minute. I'm like, what? Where did you come up with that? And he's like, well, and he would kind of explain, but it was all about, using your judgment and using that knowledge and experience that you've gained and how you can like put that to use. And that it's not just all about, learning something out of the books, but going out and getting experience and seeing how the world works and how things are built. And the other thing that I just always really appreciated, so when I went to that consultant in Idaho, I'm pretty sure that I was the first woman that was not support staff that they had hired at the consulting firm. And I definitely kind of felt it when we met with clients, and, that somebody would say something like, oh, I'm going to have to like watch my language. I don't want to, upset you. Like I'm going to be too sensitive, or just kind of giving me a look like, you're an engineer? I've never seen one like you before.
Uh,
And he was just always, I mean, I never got that from any of the staff in the company. And I feel like he really kind of set that tone of, you know, you know, hey, no, she's the engineer and she's really smart and she's going to go do this and she's going to go do that. And just always really supportive. And that really meant a lot to me, especially kind of with the story that I told you that I kind of diverted and went away from engineering for a while. And so to come into my first job and have somebody that was like such a, cheerleader and had so much respect for my knowledge and what I brought to the job was really meaningful.
Love it, love it. And then to all the city engineers out there who are fighting your same battle in the trenches with you, what are you going to say to them to keep them motivated, to keep them inspired?
Well, it goes back to what I said earlier, the work that we do, and I think this kind of goes for everybody in public works. I mean, the work that we do really does make our society and our country just work, right? It's about the clean water, and it's about moving the people and the goods and the commerce that we have on our roads and other transportation systems, and cleaning up the water, the air, making sure that we have systems that everybody can use. And it's such really important work. And I know that sometimes it feels like people don't really know what you do, or it's not kind of the sexy thing. But we also know that when it's not working, you are going to hear an earful, because it's so critical and it's so basic to just our lives. And just to really not forget how important the work that you do is to everybody's lives.
Sure. Thank you for that. Well, Jenifer, thank you for hopping on the podcast. Thank you for sharing your wealth of information and knowledge with us. To all the listeners out there, make sure you share this with somebody who you think needs to hear it. Just like Jenifer said, if we share these cool stories and instances with younger people, they might want to come this way instead of going into the tech route or somewhere else. So
yeah,
make sure you share this with somebody. Last but not least, if you know somebody that wants to be on the podcast, feel free to have them reach out to me so I can get them on the show. Jenifer, any final words before we get out of here?
Just again, thank you for this really fun opportunity, and it was nice to meet you, Joseph.
Sure thing. Well, this has been the Public Works Podcast, and thank you for tuning in.